So far all the images that we used are created by others. Now we will create our own custom images. Here is what we are going to do to create our own image. We are going to create a Docker file, then the Dockefile is provided to the Docker client. The client will pass it off to the server and the Docker server will get it converted into an usable image. Dockefile is a simple text file with instructions that is used to create an image. Oftentimes the name of the file will be Dockefile, D in uppercase, and the file doesn't have any extension. In fact, you can change the name of Dockefile, but in that case, we will have to provide the file name explicitly during the build process. Dockefile contains instructions in plain text. If we break it down further, these are the three main sections available in a Dockefile. It will have a base image from which the image is created. The next section is to copy and install additional packages and programs for the image. After that there will be a section to specify a command to run at the startup of the container. Now we are going to Dockerize a Node.js application. For that we need to have latest version of Node installed in our machine. We will create a separate folder for our app. Then we will start a new terminal at the folder. We will use npm init command to create the default package.json file. Now we will open this in VS Code. We will create a server.js file. To use Express in our Node app, we need to install it. Express is installed, and now we can use it to create a simple server. We will set up a root for our app. We can respond with a simple text message to the requests coming into the root. Now we will have to set up a port to listen for our server. Here we will keep it as 5000. Now we will edit the scripts section in package.json file to make sure that our server starts with npm start command. Let's see if our Node server is working. We can start the server with npm start and see the server in action if we check localhost 5000 in the browser. Our server is working, but as of now, this app has nothing to do with Docker. We will Dockerize it as the next step. To Dockerize our app we need to create a Docker file. As discussed earlier, the Docker file can be divided into three main sections. We will just mark it here as comments. Our base image here is going to be a very minimal version of Node. Name of the image is Node and version is Alpine. Now we will copy all our source code to the container. Anything that we want to ignore while copying can be mentioned in Docker ignore file, which we will create later on. Next instruction is to install the npm packages. After that we will add the startup command that we want to execute while starting our container. In our case it is npm start. We are almost done, but we have a small problem here. Since we haven't provided a working directory in the Docker file, our files will be copied to the root of our container. We can make it more structured by providing a working directory in the Docker file. If the working directory is not present in container, it will be created. Next step is to build an image using this Docker file. For that, the command is docker build. Don't forget the dot as it provides the context to find the Docker file. The build process creates some intermediate image that can be cached to speed up further builds. Once the image is created, we can see it among the local images available in our system. We can run a container from this image, using the image ID. We are mapping port 8080 of our local host to port 5000 of our container. Remember, in our Node app we were listening to port 5000, so our app inside the container listens to port 5000. Since we are port mapping, all the requests coming to port 8080 of our local host will go to port 5000 of our container, and our app will be available in localhost 8080. Now we will get a command prompt inside our container, just to have a look at the files and directories, which also includes our Node app. For that we will use exec command. When we shell into the container, we land directly into the working directory as set in our Docker file. In our case it was user app folder. listing of all files and folders. There will show us our Node app. We can inspect other files and folders as well. While copying files to container, if we want to ignore a file or a folder, we can include those in Docker ignore file. It works like git ignore and git. We can tag our images while building the image, but if we want to push our image to Docker Hub, then we need to name our local image using your Docker Hub username and the repository name that we created through Docker Hub on the web. Here fizzbuzz2402 is my Docker Hub username and Node app is repo name. We can add multiple images to a repository by adding a specific tag. If tag is not added, it defaults to latest. Now the image is available in the local. We can push it to Docker Hub using docker push command. Once the push is complete, we can see the repo in our Docker Hub account. Now we will delete the local image and run this image from Docker Hub as a container in our machine. Docker RMI command will help us remove the local image. We will use docker run command to run our image from Docker Hub as a container. Port mapping is done, as we did earlier from 8080 to 5000. Once the container is successfully started, we can verify it in the browser by hitting localhost port 8080.